So I talk about free will a bit. Free will is a recurring theme with me because I feel like, we can map things out in terms of how persuasive they are. We can try to. Scott Adams once actually said, and he's at Scott Adams Says on Twitter, he said that free will isn't a thing. He kind of goes with the rational free will, which Sam Harris has also talked about. So rational free will is how I frame it. I call it rational free will. No, Adams said, I digress. Adams said that if persuasion could be measured, persuasion, it would be outlawed. So we have this propensity. This is something that goes into a bit of my advocacy and my qualms with things like third person effect and mind reading and projecting. I do a little bit of it myself. Let's not mince words here. I've made certain assumptions that I shouldn't have. I've made mistakes I shouldn't have. And as I say at the end of the video, a lot of what I say here could be wrong. A lot of it could be right as well. But this idea that we can sort of really get down into, on a scientific level, determine what stimuli are going to cause people to do certain things. Like, every time you get this response from somebody, this body language, this channel is about unwinding all that. My body language on here is sometimes, I'm just going to be honest with you people, deliberately designed to throw you off. And that's the point. I want to show everybody. I want to be transparent and show everyone you can't do the mind reading thing. You can't, everyone has a different perspective. Like, for example, this little thing here. You know what they say? If you do one, think about it this way. A body language expert would tell you, if you do one shoulder, you're lying. If you do both, you're not lying. I mean, I've said so many things on here that I believe, some of which are, you could observe to be true, and I've gone like this. It might seem, it could be a nervous tick, but it's not always the same thing. So with rational free will, someone like Sam Harris or Adams will come up and say that they're, as philosophers, and I'm a philosopher, you're a philosopher, we're all philosophers, really. I don't like to use the term that much. But as philosophers about free will, they say, well, hey, every single rational free will, this is rational free will, where it says living isn't optional, it's imperative. I'll do a full read in a second. But they go through this whole thing where they say from the start of the Big Bang, every interaction, every chemical interaction, everything that's happened, every molecule that's moved, it's all kind of going, life continues, life keeps on going until it doesn't. Till it ends in some form. We talked about the heat death of the universe, sure. But basically the idea is that we are the sum, our actions, we might think that we're being unpredictable or we're different, but in reality, it's all like preordained in some basic way. It's not necessarily saying that like every action is determined. It's not like pure determinism, but it's sort of a general determinism. Like you get down to those micro decisions, those moments where you can either go left or right, A or B. I call them micro decisions when you do an A or B at the very end, the last two, either this way or this way, yes or no, 0 or 1. With rational free will, a lot of the talk around it revolves around how we are biological beings. We are basically a combination of our two parents, how they think, how they do things, and so forth. So, and that living isn't optional. So I say here, rational free will. Rational free will, living isn't optional, it's imperative. On this channel, we really keep the full mosaic available for you. So sometimes you get 3 or 4 different approaches for a specific topic question. So they'll say that, like, you can generally determine what people are going to do based on this. Like, oh, we know that Cliff is a cut-up. He's a cut-up. So of course he thinks that he's being so contrarian. He thinks that he's doing a really crazy thing by by disagreeing. And then you start to realize, wait a second, Cliff almost always disagrees. Holy shit. Cliff is predictably unpredictable. Or at least he thinks he is. I don't know. Like, the reality is, we are affected by stimuli. This is, some philosophers will say, don't say reality, Jeff. What reality? Don't say that. I'm like, come on. Let people talk. Let people talk. You infer what I'm saying here. The reality is that we have all kinds of influences all the time. Some of them conscious, some of them subconscious. Some of them are subliminal, some of them are unconscious. We mimic, we emulate, we do what looks good, we taste what looks good, we eat the food that looks good, color matters, pattern recognition. We're just like Adams again, pattern recognition machines. Pattern recognition machines. And despite that, we're also something else. Irrational. Irrational. We don't even know our own emotions at the moment. Sometimes we're in a mood, we don't even know why we're in that mood. Then we go, oh, I'm hungry. I'm in a bad mood and I'm hungry. So I call this irrational free will, in which living is an art and we are artists. Living is an art and we are artists. Irrational free will is what humans actually experience. We can try as we might. It's good to have that bar there, rational free will, to say, look, I know in many ways we are the sum of our parts, and in many ways we aren't. In many ways we're triggered by what we've been conditioned to over 10, 20, 30, 100 years of our lives. That's rational to think that. To think we're pattern recognition machines. If we experienced a bad emotion if we experienced a bad emotion when doing this action, say going to the circus. I got traumatized at the circus. Not me, but in this example, it's somebody who got traumatized at the circus. And they say, I don't like going to the circus because that one time as a child, I'll never be able to get over it. It gives me such dread, such anxiety, because this one moment, my emotions were thrown. Nothing happened to me personally, but my emotions at the time, I have trauma. I have memories of all this problem. I don't even want to try it again. Actually, some have said that people that voted in 2016 might not vote in 2020 because of the trauma of doing something and having it come out with a bad result. But I voted for Clinton. How did Clinton not make it? It's traumatic, it can be. Hey, maybe Trump supporters will feel the trauma this autumn. Autumn is coming, after all. We'll see what happens. So I call it living as an art, and we're artists, because at a certain point, if you can start to become, and usually people, I think most people do by the time they hit their 20s or 30s, sometimes even before, but they become self-aware enough, we do, that we start to know what our weaknesses are, we know our strengths, and we know just what gets us and what makes us feel good. I think it's something that many of us do come to. Some never come to it, but I mean, a lot of us discover about ourselves what we're built about, what we're about. And eventually I've taken on a sort of, especially with this channel and with my Twitter, this sort of art approach. Living is an art, comedy is an art. I don't want to call science an art because there's art and science, and many things are both. Persuasion is an art and science. There's other things. Music is an art and a science. There's a lot of parts, a lot of things out there that could be framed as an art form, depending on how you're doing them. There's a difference between arts and crafts, but we won't get into that in this video. But I did want to talk about rational free will. Just a real quick refresher before we end the video. Rational free will, in which Living isn't optional, it's imperative, it's a biological imperative. And this doesn't mean just inside your body. It doesn't mean just inside your veins, the blood flowing through, and genes and all this stuff that's happening in your body. I'm not a doctor. Don't take medical advice from a YouTuber, a BitChute personality, or people on TikTok. Living doesn't necessarily even mean just living. Ideas live. There's a determinism. They keep going until somebody kills them. But rationally, you'd say living isn't optional. It's imperative. You live until you die. The circle of life continues. And the idea that, our path isn't set, but because of all the limits placed on us, because of our physical, corporeal bodies, their frames in this world, we can't just disappear, fly off, do whatever we want. We don't have complete free will, but we have limits. And then we have irrational free will, which essentially throws aside everything we've come to understand and is largely emotion-based and so forth. And that's kind of what we operate on in general. So I say irrational free will, living is an art, and we're artists.